Hi good people, today I'm going to quickly show you how to add knurling to your 3D objects. First, let's add a cylinder to our scene. Let's set it to 64 vertices, and then we'll rotate it on the X by 90 degrees. Let's tab into edit mode, we'll do face select, and let's build out our shape. Once you get the shape you're happy with, let's go to face select, hold the Alt key, click, and grow the selection of where you want to add your knurling to. Then press Shift D to duplicate the selection, and then right click to snap it back in place. With the selection highlighted, press P, and then you can separate by selection, tab back into object mode, and then you can select and see that your object is completely separate. Let's go ahead and add a bevel to our main shape. And then let's go ahead and add a sharpen modify as well. On the separated piece, we can tab into edit mode, go into side view, and let's add some cuts to increase our geometry count. The amount of cuts that you want to add are basically going to be based on the size of the knurling that you want done. Something like this selection should work just fine. I'm going to right click so it centers, and that completes that. You can press A to select your entire piece here, and then under face selection at the top, we're going to choose extrude individual faces. You're then going to right click so it snaps it back into place. After snapping it back in place, we're going to change our pivot point from median to individual origins. And if you press S to scale, we can choose a smaller size, something around there. And then if you press Alt and S, we can then push out the knurling to any distance you want, really. With the knurling phase complete, you may want to scale the object along an axis, depending on the style or the shape you're going for. Once that's done, we can go back to the main object. We are going to apply our boolean, our bevel, and then we're going to duplicate the object, so press Shift D. Then we can right click, and then we can rename that object to just simply object underscore low. And then we'll hide it. For the remaining object, we're going to rename this one to object underscore high. And then we can select our knurling, and then shift select our high object last, and press Ctrl J. Join the two pieces together. So now they're one mesh object. We can then hide our high object, bring back our low object, select it, and let's go to the UV editing space. We're going to select Image, New. We'll title it UV. A 1K texture is fine for this example. And then I'm going to change it to a UV grid and click OK. I'm going to turn on the dynamic link here so I can see my selection in real time. And then if I press A to highlight everything, press U, Smart UV Project, click OK. And then if I need to view the stretching, I can scroll wheel, display stretch, and then make sure my UV unwrap looks okay. We can come to the shading tab and we can add a new material. Material name we can call it as UV. We can delete our principal BSDF. Do Shift A to add, go to texture, and we'll add an image texture and drop that into the scene. You can hit the little down arrow here and select your UV map that you created from the UV editing tab. And then you can plug that in here. And you can preview your mesh to make sure that the the cuts look okay and there's nothing off. If there's any issues, the Smart UV Project may not be the way to go. You may want to do a manual unwrap. I'm going to have a slight issue here, but just for this demonstration, I think that's going to be okay. We're going to come back to our main layout window here. What we're going to do is we're going to shift select everything in the scene. Just make sure just the object high and object low is selected. Make sure your camera and light are not included. And then we're going to go to File, Export. I'm going to do an FBX. Choose a location. I'm going to do selected objects only. My forward is going to be X in the positive direction, and my up is going to be Z in the positive direction. I'll give it a name, and then I'll hit Export. Go ahead and import your FBX into your favorite baking software. In this example, I'm going to use Marmoset. Choose New Bake Project. I'm going to hit the Quick Loader option. Choose my FBX file. We can see the low poly imported, and we can also see the high poly imported fine. I'm going to choose samples to 16. Pick a default location. Call this Knurling Marmo. I'm going to do a simple 1K texture, and I'm going to bake out the normals, curvature, and ambient occlusion only. Then I can hit preview. If I'm happy with the bake, then I can simply hit bake. With the bake out of the way, I can come up to the top and click this easel, create a new texture project. If I select my UVs on the right, I can then hit this cube to link the materials. Any maps missing, you can just simply click on them and select the appropriate maps for each item. For the export location, I'm going to choose the same location, but change it to a PNG. But this time, I'm going to call it Knurling UE for Unreal Engine. I'm then going to change the map type from TGA to PNG on each of the items. Pay special attention to the mix map, where the red, green, and blue channels are specified for ambient occlusion, roughness, and metalness. Alright, we're going to come to our texture map, and we can choose the metal folder, and just starting off, pick any metal, drag it on, and then we can kind of see how it looks. I'm maybe going to go with a nickel pocked, and then I'm going to delete my aluminium brushed. On the Layers tab on the right, we can right-click and add a fill layer. I'm going to disable the normal by clicking right here, and that will allow the nickel pock to actually show through. You can then right-click on the fill layer, add a mask, and do Fill Mask Black. You can then right-click on that fill layer, add another layer, processor, and scratch. And then we can come down to our grunge maps, find an appropriate scratch layer, whatever you want. I'll actually just use grunge scratched. And then you can see the effect that has on your model. If you want to reverse the colors, just hit the little paint drop here, and it will actually swap colors for you. You can play with the intensity, contrast, and the scratch intensity, scratch contrast, and scale, and you can get different effects. If you're happy with the design layout, you can come back to your base layer, whatever it is, and then you can actually bump up the albedo contrast, and that can add some burn effects on your actual texture project. This is also a good point where you can come back into the metals folder, and if you're not happy with the metal you used, you can go through and give some other metals a look. You can just drag them in, replace the material reference here, and then all your other settings will stay the same, but you can preview it using a different metal compound. If you're happy with your texture project, you can simply come down to the bottom, and there is a export settings. We'll change this to a 1K texture, and then just hit the export all. Once your texture maps are exported, we now need to export the baked model. What we can do is come back up to the baked project, and we can select the high poly, and we can delete it, and then we can come into File, Export, choose FBX, uncheck Materials and Lights, choose a location. I'm going to call this Knurling UE, and then with that you can just hit Export. You can now open an Unreal Engine scene, and then you can simply drag in your new FBX file. It was the Knurling UE. The defaults for the import are usually fine, just hit Import All, and it should create your static mesh. You'll also need to bring in the 3 texture maps that you created during your texture project. Drag those in here. Now the first thing we'll do is we'll create a new material, call it m_knurling. You can open that up here, and then we can shift select and drag our 3 texture maps in. The way you'll hook these up is pretty straightforward. The albedo is going to be the RGB channel, hook that into the base color. The normal is also RGB, hook that into normal. The mixture map is actually going to pull off the red channel into the ambient occlusion, the green channel in the roughness, and the blue channel in the metallic. And if you select your square texture map here, you can see that looks very similar to our UV unwrap that we did in Blender. And remember, these settings can be found in Marmoset under the texture project at the bottom. You'll see the red channel ambient occlusion, green is roughness, blue is metalness. With your material created, we can now right click and create a blueprint class of type actor. Call it BP_Knurling. Open that up, control spacebar, select your Knurling static mesh. We'll add the component section, make a reference to it. And now you simply come to the material slot and search for your m_Knurling that you just made. Then we can compile and save, and that completes the setup for the blueprint. Now I've brought both static meshes into the scene. We have the high poly on the left and the low poly on the right. The level of detail is going to be much better in the high poly than the baked version, but do keep in mind it is also a lot more expensive. So you can see the mesh is very dense. So those are some of the trade-offs though. And just like that though, you can add interesting knurling patterns to any 3D assets. Thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and see you on the next one.